Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the TF Cast. I'm Willis.
Hey, Grum here. It is October 23rd here in the Solarium.
And I am your host, Jacob Basis. Today we are very pleased to bring Bobby Drengler to the show, who is a longtime music producer in the Mankato area. Bobby, if you could just introduce yourself to the audience and tell us how you got started in the music industry.
You know, I'd love to. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here it's a beautiful day here in the fall of Mankato, Minnesota, and I've been through about, I would say, 70 of these falls here now in Mankato. I arrived here when I was 10, and I've been in music all my life here and still enjoying it. And thank you for inviting me, and here we go. Should we start?
Yeah.
I would love to start.
Yeah.
I would like to start going back on how it all started back when there were just ballrooms to play.
Mm-hmm.
And the ballrooms that were happening back then were all union. And, of course, all the musicians were union at the time, so here we go to Spike Haskell and Maxine Haskell. Spike Haskell was an incredible musician back then and promoter. Mm-hmm. And Maxine was our local Union 477 secretary that took care of us all. And we enjoyed a number of years playing ballrooms. Now, ballrooms at the time were big bands. Now we're talking in 1958, 1959.
Yeah. We're going to try and do a comprehensive discovery of the history of local Mankato music here and regional music from probably the mid to late 50s through current, it seems like. So we're back at 59 is where this was starting with the unions and the ballrooms.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to jump up through ballrooms to bars, to studios, to the present day.
Okay. Perfect.
And that let's start out with the ballrooms, though, because that to me that was an era, that ballroom era, that big band era was huge. But then the electric guitar came, and when the electric guitar came, the electric guitar changed from a 12, 15-piece band to a 4-piece band, and hello, 4-piece band making the same amount of money as a 15-piece band and drawing almost a better crowd and a new crowd. It was a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And we played, and we enjoyed playing, and we enjoyed it because of one person, and that was Jimmy McGuire. Jimmy McGuire and his ability to learn how to play that guitar was phenomenal. Now, let's take the first rock and roller Mankato ever had. His name was Dave Johns. Dave Johns goes back, and I think he was a preacher's son. And he started doing preaching music, church music, songs, and all of a sudden, bam, rock and roll hit, and he started singing rock and roll. And Jimmy McGuire got a job playing with him. Now, we're talking now 8th grade and freshmen in high school. Man, that was a interesting era. Then all of a sudden, we're playing dances and all of that, and hello, the bunny hops and the twist started, and all of these various dances happening, and bands. We had bands all of a sudden. Bingo.
I'm sorry. Can I have a question about the ballrooms in general going into this? Right, like from our audience perspective, they probably have a lot of experience with the Cato Ballroom because it still exists and it's just extremely large and there's only one of it. In this era, like there were more of these establishments in the area, right? Like there was.
I think if you were to count them, we had 5 of them.
There was 5, and are these structures still standing?
None.
Oh, they've been demolished. Because the other thing, that was really interesting to me is you talk about the electric guitar coming in and changing that, and there must have been a change in the physical size because the Cato Ballroom is huge. I can't imagine like music with much less amplification being in there. Were these similar sized, or were people like just generally closer to the musicians?
Well, the early amplification days, you have to understand, were all tube type, and it wasn't really that loud. We didn't have Marshall amplifiers yet. It was just the old Fenders and Ampex. So it wasn't really and they weren't very large. I mean, a basement amplifier for the bass guy was only the size of a suitcase. And the guitar amplifier was, equal. So it wasn't, but the amplification of it was more. Remember, you only had one microphone on stage back then, too, back in the ballroom big band era. And all of a sudden, with that amplification came microphones also. So now everybody had a microphone, and everybody had an amp.
And when you say there was one microphone, is that microphone being used just for the vocal, like someone using their voice,
Yes.
or is it
when you walked into a ballroom back in those early days, you would see a band there, full piece band, 10, 12, 15 piece band, and one microphone.
Sure. Well,
And
the rest of it kind of uses the natural amplification of the room.
Right.
To try and create
That as well as just having like 5 trumpet players and a bunch of saxophone players. Is that correct?
Right.
I think another really interesting piece of perspective would be to hear, one, if you can like remember any of the names of these ballrooms, that'd be really cool. Like I think that would interest a lot of like Mankato history people. But what was, there's 5 ballrooms in Mankato. Like they have individual cultures within them, and like how are people determining? You're going out on a Friday night or something, and are people like having a conversation about which ballroom they want to go to and who's playing? Like this is a cultural conversation. Are these regional musicians or traveling?
You nailed it. It was a cultural decision on who they wanted to see, because all 5 of them had different shows going on. And Hardiger's Ballroom on Lake Jefferson was very, very popular. In fact, that particular ballroom drew a lot of early rock and roll people, because it was that kind of place, and although the Cato Ballroom, and now those were A shows there too, because Bill Deal from the WDGY. That was our main radio station back then that had radio rock and roll going on at the time, was a major influence. In fact, Jimmy McGuire reminds me of the times that Bill Deal actually hired Jimmy and I to front him to do shows with him, and we'd go in and sing a couple of songs and play our little gig, and then introduce him. He would come in, throw records off the stage. We would sing a song and do the next ballroom. And we'd do 2, 3, 4 ballrooms a night.
Oh.
So that was back in the day, though. That's when, we're talking 59, 60 here, 58.
Well, even to add another point of reference for the timeline, I think a lot of people in Mankato would be at least vaguely familiar of the Buddy Holly story, with Buddy Holly having an explosive rise to stardom or growing fan track, and then he actually died in '59, which would have been following his show in Mankato around that time as well. So 59 and what we're talking about sounds like when the electric guitar was. Did Buddy play with electric? Was he one of the smaller bands?
Yes, no, they were full electric.
Primary example of one of those bands that's taking advantage of the new technology and seeing some of that trajectory coming through Mankato right around that time, and then so they were probably actively shifting the culture at those ballrooms as well.
Yep.
From the big bands to the smaller.
Oh, absolutely.
Bands.
Life was changing drastically, and that was back when not everybody had TVs yet. You know, it was just starting to. The TVs were just coming onto the center stage, you know. So it was a very, very, very the ballroom era. I like to look at it as all of those people, that war era, those people coming back from World War II, looking at you know, a place, a weekend, you know,
date night out.
Yeah. I have one more big question based on your kind of the intro that you gave, and it is about the culture within the group of musicians themselves. You mentioned that everyone was union back then, and we talk to musicians and artists all the time here, oftentimes about how they make it. You know, because things have really, really changed. What was the conversations that musicians were having about how they supported themselves as musicians, and how were those unions organized? I mean, I imagine that they had like a union office and then people joined guilds or something like that, but it seems so decentralized that it's a little hard for me to understand.
If you're looking back, yes, it's very difficult to understand because you actually had to be there because it was so matter of fact. Not only were you union, but the club was union.
Oh yeah.
So it was a dual relationship.
Yeah.
In order for you to get union bands, you had to sign up as a union stage.
And so were these bands, this is probably has to be the last question that we can move on, but were these bands playing like standards or originals, or what was like the content that was being played on stage like at this time?
It was there. First of all, there weren't a lot of you know. There wasn't an overflow of original material at the time. So, and the basic was standards. And when you got standards, you had your bebop standard, and you had your rock and roll standard, and you had your dance standard.
Motown.
You know? Right. And so you had that Detroit movement happening, and you had, and you had, don't forget the country movement.
Absolutely.
You know, they had a country movement, but the rock and roll movement was really strong.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what made people dance.
Yeah.
They loved to dance. And it showed, because look at how many dances they created. I mean, who would ever? We played downtown in a club above. I think it's called the South Street Saloon now, upstairs, and we were doing the bunny hop, and I swear we had to stop because the floor.
Like the old What's Up Lounge floor.
I mean, it was just. But that was back in the day, yeah.
Sure. And so from that ballroom era, what was the progression?
It went right into bars.
Sure. And what caused that to change over? Like, was it?
I think it was transportation, the travel and communication. People all of a sudden found a way of life in suburbs, and all of a sudden it became a you know.
Wait, are you speaking regionally here?
Yeah.
Okay, so like there was there was a more like densely packed Mankato previously.
There wasn't.
And then it sprawled?
There wasn't an upper. This did not exist.
Sure.
Where I am at now wasn't here.
This building was mid '60s.
Yeah.
So it would have been. This would have been coming up right at the end of that ballroom time.
Right. So you're looking back, and the college hadn't moved yet.
Oh, it was still downtown.
Yeah.
So there, that student population, I can't imagine that it was.
We had the student population was down there. Of course, it wasn't as big as now. I think it was like 2,000 max, but it's still huge for Mankato.
Yeah, I mean that's one full. That's one full ballroom at least.
Oh yeah. No, and bars.
Yeah.
Bars were, that's what the bars in the 60s, all of a sudden the 70s, when the 70s hit, the bars took over.
So it sounds like it's more like people began to more densely populate smaller areas and no one wanted to travel to go to these ballroom shows all the time. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
So
because
more like
everything
the
was
bar
right.
down the street.
Right. Everything was just across the street.
And you were saying that you could do like 6 gigs a week instead of like six in a day.
That was that's one of the things. Ballrooms were only open on Friday and Saturday nights, sometimes Sundays, but but bars are open every day.
Yep.
So hello, I mean that. And I know when my early days with City Mouse, 1971, 1972. Billy and I, we were working 7 nights a week.
Wow. Very jealous.
Yeah.
I wish I could gig 7 nights a week.
7 nights a week. And we did it for months and months.
Oh,
I mean,
that's awesome.
it just didn't stop,
Wow.
And we had a lot of opportunity to work too. So, yeah. No, big change from bars, from ballrooms to bars.
And then as we're moving into this, people starting to write more original songs?
Absolutely.
And more
not only write, but all of a sudden, everything was non-union.
Oh, yeah.
So all of a sudden, the price changed.
Yeah.
And you're working a lot more.
Yeah, and there's like a accessibility thing that like now like 18-year-old with a guitar could like genuinely play a show, and yeah, that's interesting.
The other things I think maybe we can tie in at this point, and correct me if I'm getting these things involved too early in our timeline, but that would be you with a 4-track and working with another artist by the name of John Denver. Is that all kind of around this period here?
Now, that all happened in 1968, 69, because I was doing a jazz album. I did a jazz album with Jimmy McGuire, and it was called It's Only Hometown Jazz. We recorded it at Universal Audio in Minneapolis, and it's an excellent recording. Jimmy did an excellent job playing. Jerry Udelhoffen on drums, who had Udelhoffen's music back then. And what happened was that Michael's of Mankato, which is across the street from what we now have as number 4, and now is a coffee shop that used to be Susan's, and back then it was called the Walnut Room.
And shout out to the Sugar Room as well. That was my childhood.
Right. Yeah. So back when it was the Walnut Room, you had the Marigold Dixieland band, so to speak, that Marigold Dairies now sponsored. And they had this Dixieland band that was absolutely first class. Now, I'll tell you how first class it was. they went down to New Orleans to do the Mardi Gras for the Mardi Gras parade and took first place.
Dang.
No, for a bunch of guys to go down there, that was pretty cool.
And that's a music city.
Yeah, right.
That's not a place. Yeah, that's awesome.
So what happened with that Walnut Room, Jay Pappas, who was a member of the Pappas family out of Rochester, Minnesota, decided that the entertainment that he was going to get good entertainment into that Walnut Room. Now, good entertainment, all of a sudden, you're looking at people that are just coming up in the industry, but are, doing gigs, like everybody else does. You're just doing a gig. And boy, I tell you, he had them all. I mean, he just... He did an excellent job of booking bands and entertainment and in that Walnut Room, and the place didn't hold that many people. I mean, it only held
it's
60,
tiny.
80 people max.
Yeah, and that's rubbing shoulders.
Yeah, right. So, to have that kind of entertainment. So getting to this is what happened. My buddy Mark Ahlstrom out of St. Peter, Minnesota, was doing the booking and sort of photography work and promotional work for John Denver. Now, he was not yet John Denver. He was thinking about becoming John Denver because they were still working in the Chad Mitchell Trio, which then was called the Mitchell Trio. And then it became Denver, Johnson, Boise, Denver, and Johnson. Excuse me. Now, what happened there is that Jay decided to hire Michael Johnson to play in his Walnut Room. Michael all of a sudden attracted John and everybody else, Chad Mitchell also. And that's how it ended up. That's when the meeting became happening. I was not even involved at the time. I was playing jazz. I was playing jazz bass at the time with Jimmy McGuire. Okay. So, but I was heavily involved in the Walnut Room, helping Jay out, booking entertainment. So,
are there any acts? I guess you named one just there, but are there any other acts that stick out to you after all these years when you think back on all the artists that came through the Walnut Room? Any that either went on to have really interesting careers or even just then really stood out?
I think that Jay has I think he fired somebody that was very, 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 very popular.
Okay, that's always fun.
It's like the reverse.
You find out you're wrong.
That is very, very, very popular. That system back then that Jay did was not only probably one of the more professional little booking systems in the southern Minnesota, but it was also one of the most environmental friendly because the Pappas family, Greek everything. I mean, Greek food, Greek everything. It was just wonderful. Michael's in Rochester was the same as Michael's in Mankato here. So.
And what do you think about their booking and promotion policy? What do you think was so successful about it? What was the secret sauce you think that made it so successful?
The people that were doing it.
Oh yeah. That's
the bookers themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta. I'll say this: the best booking agent I've ever had was Bob Dylan's brother.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's he was absolutely, Billy and I had him, and he had us working 3 gigs a day.
Dang.
You know?
Dang. What do you think made him so successful? Just like super personable, or do you, or like, what did you really like about working with him? Or was it just the frequency of gigs he was booking you?
Working with David Zimmerman?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. I was just told that he was really a great booker, so I called him up and asked him if he would book us. And he said yes, you know, yeah. And he did, and we enjoyed it. But yeah, no, the bands in the area were really starting to, at the time, in that late 60s, early 70s, generate. You had the Judd Band happening. You had, City Mouse forming. There was a lot of bands that were just happening. We created the People's Fair.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of good music happening.
Awesome.
I would like to know a little bit more about the People's Fair, but before we get into that, I would also wonder, these musicians, how much access to recording technology did they have in general? And are there any records from local musicians at that time that stick with you today? Like they're, just something that someone who was interested in Mankato music history could look up.
I would say if you wanted to look up somebody that would really, I think you would enjoy today, both audibly and visually, is Michael Dudash. Michael Dudash, I got to play with the Dudash brothers. They're excellent musicians. Steve Dudash, an incredible violin player. Get his music. You can get his music online. He's a violin player extraordinaire, and Michael Dudash. Now, his music you might have to get to me personally on, but but I tell you, his visuals, he's one of the leading visual cowboy artists in the world.
Cool.
So.
Interesting. That kind of ties into another thing that I've always just a little bit wondered, and I think you might be one of the best people to answer this question, especially regionally, is people had to congregate around music because I can't imagine that, a band like City Mouse, who is gigging 3 times a day, they didn't have studio albums at that time, did they? I mean,
we recorded. Now get this, because of the Gestures.
Yeah, I was waiting for that name to come up too.
Yeah,
actually,
because of the Gestures in '65. Now, Dale Menton got heavily involved in engineering or studio work in Minneapolis. And the place where I recorded Universal Audio, my album, Dale actually ended up with that studio and turned it into Cookhouse Recording Studios. And that, he became a total, how would you say, landlord, directional, inspirational influencer on how to and what you need to do in order to get the job done audially. And boy, he did an excellent job at it. So.
Sure. Yeah, maybe if you could introduce the People's Fair, because I think for a lot of people, especially people our age, the People's Fair exists as like a recurring Mankato memories post with like 6 photos where people talk about how great it was.
Well, the reason that it was so great is because it was created for a really, really good purpose. Now, the Blue Earth County had a crisis hotline telephone system. Now, this is landline. We didn't have, this is way, way before cell phones. Now, these landlines, the crisis hotline, they had a problem on funding. So they came to us and they said, hey, what do you think about doing a fundraiser or something? So I went out and I approached the city and to do something at Sibley Park first, and they didn't because there was no electricity out there at the time. Nothing to plug into. And then I approached, now get this is a great, and thank you, Mary Jane Ohm's dad, Kent. He was the vice president, I think, at the time of MSU or, Mankato State back then. And the president was in there. I went to him and asked him if I could do a concert for donations for this crisis hotline thing. And it worked. He gave me anywhere I wanted on state property. Now, that was 1971, and that's when the first People's Fair was, and it was a band standing on the steps of a university and playing and asking for donations. But you got to remember, this also was the time of there's a lot of protests going on.
Vietnam War.
So people were very active and very used to standing outside and enjoying.
How did you because so we come from an era of when you book a show, you make a poster and then you do most of your promotion like on the internet. Like I would say 90% of my promotion, besides talking to people, is on the internet. How did you guys, what did you do to promote these shows and fairs and stuff? Well,
back then you had, the radio was huge.
Oh, okay.
And the radio was the tool. I mean, it was you had it like the size of, or you had a transistor radio this big you could carry around with you and get tunes with, hello. Yeah. So no, the radio was huge, and we used the radio a lot.
Okay.
And it was used a lot.
They played local tunes on the radio.
Pardon me?
They would play local tunes on the radio.
Oh, yes. And to give you an idea, back then, for KY Country, I got involved with them, and there was a guy named Don Fields who had the Caledonia, which is now Hooligans. Well, Don, when he put a stage in, I said, well, Don, I said, how about taking your worst night and turning it into your best night? And so what I did is that I put the Caledonia radio show together, and we broadcasted live out of the Caledonia every Thursday night.
That's
at
fun.
8 o'clock.
I love that idea.
Wow. And it was not only a draw, but it was very popular. In other words, sponsorship. Yeah. And my agreement with Don was, I said, Don, you can keep everything outside. And I said, just give me the sponsorship, right? So I ended up with the sponsorship, and he ended up with the crowd.
Who sponsored y'all?
At that time, my most favorite sponsor that I had was Mankato Ford.
Oh, sure. Was that Harrison Ford at the time still?
Or was it different? I couldn't tell you that. I didn't. Mankato Ford, I know it was owned by a local family. I know that.
Right on. And what were some of the acts that were coming through the People's Fair and kind of the bar scene. And when
you said that, my favorite is Shangoya. Shangoya was that. I mean, I love that band for some reason. I don't have any spiritual reasons why I should like an Islander music kind of thing, but it really had the feeling to it. It gave me a lot of good vibes.
Was it like calypso, like steel drums and stuff? Is that what you mean by it? Cool.
Right.
Fun.
Yeah, and it was very, very. And you're talking the 70s now.
Yeah.
Hello,
Yeah.
That was absolutely my favorite. But yeah.
Cool. Well, and the People's Fair, I think, for one thing that surprised me when looking into that event a bit was that it's occurred over the course of about 30 years, it seemed like. So
yes, and it ran a very long time, and the
all
reason
the way up to 2000 almost.
Now, the first 5 years that we did the People's Fair, it was totally donation only.
Yeah,
and the bands played the first 2 or 3 years played for free just to get the crisis hotline going, Eclipse, up and running, to keep them up and running.
Yeah.
And then what happened was that the People's Fair, I talked the county into giving everybody that played, anybody that participated, $35. So at least they got paid, And then so that worked out really well for a while. And then the People's Fair decided that, when you can get this, when you start drawing 5, 6, 8, 10,000 people, and it's a 2-day event. We had bluegrass on Sunday, and rock and roll on Saturday. It was it was really a excellent weekend, and it was the first. I deliberately put it on the Walleye opener and Mother's Day, because I wanted it to be a kind of a opening musical event. And it was.
Kick off the summer.
Kick off the summer with a little music,
Wow.
and a good time. And it was. It was very, very. I enjoyed it. I hosted it, I don't know, for 10, 15 years, and then I handed the wand over to Peter and the rest of the group, and. Yeah, they did a really good job. I mean, they got some major acts in there also after that. So,
why did it cease?
Why did
you guys stop throwing it, or why did it stop happening?
To tell you the truth, it wasn't because of the crowds.
Yeah.
It was only because of the, how would you say, when you draw a crowd like that, you draw a lot of other stuff too.
Yeah.
And these people weren't quite in the show business, that were involved in this. And it takes a show business kind of noodle to get around all of the various things that you have to do.
I can't imagine just how much you had to even bring in terms of like stage, porta potties, food, just all of the logistical stuff to make something that size happen.
Can you imagine doing all the communication with no Facebook or group chats or like even an email
or a mobile phone?
Like letters and phones. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it was that whole open air thing was happening too, because of Woodstock was at the same time, that was 69, so this was 71, and so the open air feeling was there. And I people still have that open air feeling. I mean, why not? If I had the choice of being inside or outside, I'll take outside in a minute.
Same. It's better to play outside too. I love playing outside.
Yeah, right.
Were people just a little bit more agnostic too about like what shows they went to in general? Like, maybe it's like, oh, there's a big event happening up at Sibley. Like, I'm gonna go check it out. I feel like now people are really surgical about their interests and time when it comes to going to shows.
It's like more lineup based. That's now what you're saying.
I feel like back then people would just be more in public. I feel like there was more of a public culture.
We didn't have a lot of options.
Yeah,
sure.
The options today, today we have a lot of options. I mean, with our phones today, people, we can go anywhere.
You can be miserable at any point of your day.
But, back then, the pre-phone era was a whole different flavor of life.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like it had such a crazy effect on the music scene because when I was a kid, even MySpace was like starting to come out and stuff, but we just went to the What's Up Lounge every Friday because it was All Ages Day. I never even looked at the lineup. Maybe there was a cool band I really wanted to see coming through, but it was very much like Jacob said, I would just be like, I go to the What's Up Lounge every Friday and see who's playing. Yeah. Nowadays, I'll look through the entire lineup, what time they're playing, like everything.
Right. Well, you got an option, and you got it at your fingertips.
Yeah. Well, that actually, this goes back to something that was said earlier that there was more options back then. Like now, I feel like there's maybe 3 or 4 things you could see if you wanted live music in town here.
Well,
but when you were describing the bars,
you're right. You're right about the options. But now we can look and see what we want to go to. Back then, you already knew. I mean, you already had your destiny. You were in control of your own destiny back then. If you like country music, you knew exactly where you were going to go.
Sure.
If you like rock and roll, you knew exactly where you were going to go.
That's something I've brought this up on this program 100,000 times about how I think that one of the big problems that's plagued Mankato's music scene is, in general, not a lack of talent or will, but that places haven't really doubled down in the last 15 years on having a culture built around their stages. They just kind of, you can book there or whatever, but, you go to certain establishments and you have an expectation.
Yeah,
and I don't see that in Mankato right now.
You know what, and I agree with you 100%, but you can't blame the owners. I have to admit it has a lot to do with the music structure, the way it is and the way it's booked.
Sure.
And that is, I mean...
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, in the early days, you could actually ask for things, that you needed on stage. And you didn't have a lot of options, but you could get them. If you wanted if you needed a microphone, you would get a microphone. If you needed an amp, you would get an amp.
Sure.
If you needed a light, you would get a light. But like today, the flavor, the whole flavor has changed. My son has a number of clubs in Minneapolis, and one being Mortimer's, which I
love playing Mortimer's. That's your son's club?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great place. I've played there.
Yeah, have you?
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah, that Jasha is... it's one of my favorite clubs, by the way.
Yeah, no, I really like that club. I had a great time playing there. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, when they put in that stage, they put in an all-inclusive stage.
Yeah.
And how did they do that? They went right to Sennheiser and asked them what to do, And when we met with those people, they said, do this, do this, do this, do this. And boy, I'm telling you, boom, you end up with an all-inclusive stage.
Yeah, I love that.
Wow. You were saying about how he approaches, I think, the booking process to make it work in a way that it was difficult.
Right.
Because we can't blame the owners.
Right. It all boils down to who's in control. Mm-hmm. And it always goes down to the booking agent.
Yeah.
He is the guy that's controlling the contracts.
Yeah. Mm.
So here you go. You know, if you want to upgrade, boom, boom, boom. You know, talk to your agent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know very many bands who have agents like right now. At least not like ones who we've talked to on this program.
Yeah. And the whole like job of promoting is
very different now.
It's very different now. Nobody, the booking is like more of a band side thing. I feel like nowadays it's like you reach out to venues or your agent reach out to venues. And I would say most of the bookers I work with are club owners. And I would also say that in my experience, the promoters don't have as much to gain, it feels like, as they used to. When I was working at the What's Up Lounge, we had promoters that was all they did. And I don't really see that in town anymore.
No, you're right.
That is like a Mankato thing. But I mean, all of those things aside, because that's more of like a larger cultural question, I think we should return to Mankato. And because you kind of had like a 3-part series here that you wanted to talk about, and it was ballrooms, bars, and then studios. So yes. I think we should get into that third part because that's very important to us.
I would love to talk about the studios because that's how it all started. I mean, for me, and it's my favorite because I got to experience a lot of brand new music for the first time, and over the years, and because of it, and and still I'm experiencing it on a little different on a different level because the studios have changed drastically. I mean, we've gone from to give you an idea. Analog is 100% history since they got rid of the headphone jack in your phone. When they got rid of the headphone jack in your phone, that was the last analog connection that you had in your life. And so now it's your phone and you and what you're doing with it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and you're at the mercy of every website's algorithm and compression, and that's the thing that gets me the most is all of every website my song sounds different.
Yeah.
That's wild.
On the positive side for the phone, though, let's make it into a global issue now. I mean, all of a sudden, you can perform something, and create something, and publish something, self-publish, and still be 100% in control of everything.
Yeah.
And that is almost a dream come true.
Mm-hmm. And when you were working in these studios, there wasn't digital audio workstations yet. You were all on tape or
What can you say about some of those early tools that you used? Either the tools themselves or maybe how they worked in the studio, how you used them in a certain kind of project. Maybe a good time too to touch back on the John Denver story.
Oh, the John Denver story, Michael Johnson and Chad Mitchell.
Okay.
Now, Chad Mitchell, Michael Johnson, and John joined the Chad Mitchell Trio. And Jay Pappas hired Michael Johnson at the Walnut, for the Walnut Room. And at the time, I had this little recording studio at a 313 North Riverfront Drive. Then it was, I think, North Front Street. And what happened was that after hours, we would congregate, and after conversation, maybe a song. A lot of conversation, a wine, a doobie, whatever, and but that was then. And what happened was that Michael was always searching for new music. John was always trying to create new music. He had lyrics going through him all the time. And then my good friend Carl Franzine, who I'm still very good friends with today, back then wrote John's first big hit, and On the Road. And that became, that lifted John up to the point where Peter, Paul, and Mary got into it and, sang Leaving on a Jet Plane. And after that, it was history. But up until that time, John was working clubs around here. St. Peter, that fishnet club in St. Peter, whatever, he used to work that quite a bit. And Mark was doing all of his early promotional materials. In fact, everything that you see from 1968 till 1972, until he signed with RCA, Mark Alstrom did visually.
Okay.
And that, of course, became the positive lift up for John. Of course, it was Leaving on a Jet Plane. Of course, that song, when that hit, that was the one that took John off to the Aspen.
What was it like working with John Denver back in those days?
I hardly recognized it at all, because nobody recognized anything, because everybody was just doing their thing. It was like what we're doing right now, in and out. I'm here today and I'm gone in an hour,
Thought it went well, maybe.
Yeah, good job, man, No, it didn't, there wasn't any personal connections at all. Now, Mark Alstrom, on the other hand, had personal connections because he was involved with Annie, and his father was a minister, and, it was a Gus Davis thing, in St. Peter. And St. Peter became a very influential, moment for this whole John Denver thing, because Annie Martell's father had a club across the river there called the Holiday House. Annie Martell, and Jim Martell was the owner of that club, and his dad. And so that became a favorite spot, so to speak.
So was the recordings with John Denver, would that have been taking place at the 313 location, or was that even after at the... No,
that was, the 313. And the recordings were very bad.
Early.
It was 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was 90% 99% conversation,
It wasn't,
and the tapes were little 1/4-inch tapes, it was awful.
It's not stuff that's out and listenable right now.
Some of the stuff is listenable, some of it, but I'm not. I'm restricted on any of the musical stuff. I use zero musical stuff, but some of the visual stuff, yes.
Okay, interesting.
Are there any recordings from that time period that you would be like excited, like things people might not know about, like musicians that you worked with that you remember from that time period that like you wish like were in like the front of people's minds when people think about the history of Mankato or St. Peter music? Are there any things that stick out to you?
The audioly, when you're in the audio visual business, back then it was just audio. The audioly, we found out that if you could plug your camera into the back of a board, a soundboard, at a concert, you would have, and if you had the right adaptation to do that, you would have a fairly decent mix that from the sound man that was already doing the mix.
Yeah.
And that, there are some recordings out there that I'm very happy with that ended up that way. And Tom Dykey has a number of them. In fact, I think you said you saw Ronnie Arsenault's. That was done that
Fair.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, young Ron Arsenault out there.
Yeah, that was Tommy Dykey who did that. He did a really good job on that.
Yeah, because they had, I was impressed by the production of those clips just for the time and whatnot. I was thinking about what we went through to try and get a clean audio signal into our cameras, and I was like, "Woof!" They did a nice job.
Right.
Yeah, well, they probably mixed everything right through the mains back then. It was a very different signal chain, I can imagine.
Well, it worked well for them. A nice result. Yeah.
What was your like you in coming into this conversation? You're kind of being like, oh, this is like cruddy little 4-track machine that I made these recordings on. But, then on the other side of it, you have this film here that was made in a studio that you had some part in. So like somehow you went from, working with a 4-track recorder in a small area to working with, all big professional equipment. What was that investiture like, and how did people respond to it and what pushed your interest in that direction?
It was a matter of do you remember disco?
I mean, I'm aware of disco. I don't remember it.
Oh, yes, like yesterday.
When disco hit, it changed my life. I decided that the whole flavor was missing. So I went on to a different flavor, and that changed my my whole perspective on production. And then after disco, we got into a sort of a outdoor amphitheater thing, and we ended up with one of the best amphitheaters in the country. This is
You're talking about Betterstone here.
Yeah, man. Perfect.
I do feel like Betterstone is something that people don't think about as large of an asset as it is.
I mean, I think we have a 12,000 capacity rate there, and at 12,000 capacity, that'll book you anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody. So you can. The world is at your feet when you. That is a beautiful, beautiful amphitheater, and to have it right downtown too. That is a double plus.
Yeah.
And. Geez, I was with the guy that sold it to the city. I was sitting in his truck. It was 13 acres there, and I was sitting in his truck, and he was reminding me of the Century Club that was across the river. No, this was before the dike. After the flood of '65, we had to have a dike.
That was the North Mankato side, right?
It was Mankato too. It flooded everything. It took out our zoo.
Oh.
drowned all of our
the Sibley
animals.
Park area.
Yeah, it was just everything went down from that area, came in. But anyway, what happened was that whole era changed then, and we got into a whole different flavor. And
The disco spark.
And you talk about going into your own direction. Then what did you invest your musical energy into during that period of time?
Believe it or not, I got into exploring. I didn't do music as much as I wanted to learn about other things.
Sure.
I wanted to learn about why were people buying silica sand? Why was our silica sand better than anybody else's silica sand that they were using for fracking? And I said, well, why? Well, if you talk to an engineer, silica sand has 9 little sides to it, and it's perfectly round. And when you have a round item used for fracking, you get a better flow. So it was good. And that
was a mineral that was produced here in our quarries.
Right.
Sure.
And it turned out because of it, that whole what we do, who we are, and the whole thing that's happening because of it. That's where we live. We live on the shelf of, sand and limestone all the way through to. And
you see the limestone. You don't necessarily see the silica. You can't go 5 feet in Mankato without tripping over a limestone block.
Yeah, right. Well, that's unstoppable too. You go down further through the limestone shelf. But yeah, no, you're right about the silica sand. But the reason I got involved in that silica sand, I'll just be real quick here, is because I found out that the Chinese were making ceramic sand. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't imagine somebody making a little piece of sand out of ceramic, and selling it to us. Yeah. But they did. And so I learned about that for a while, and I thanked those people up in the Iron Range up there. I got the university up there and got those iron ore people involved, and I learned quite a bit about
it just one very quick aside about sand is it's really interesting to look into how sand is collected and distributed across the world in general, and it's actually the amount of sand we use in construction is just absolutely wild, and they pull it up from the sea floor, and it causes all kinds of erosion in the oceans. It's really interesting to look into, and there's a lot of climate change elements there. I encourage people to look into how sand is sourced. But anyways, we should get back to Mankato.
Good job, Jacob. That's exactly why I got involved.
Yeah,
it was an environmental thing. I said, this is too weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sand is not an infinite resource by any means. It's certainly a thing. But we're in the 90s now? Are we in the 90s?
Well, let's go to 2000.
Okay.
Let's jump into the what we're doing, how we got here today.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, the reason how we got here today is because of this phone. Mm-hmm. I mean, this thing is phenomenal. What you can do today. In communications and in the music business, in our studio world, we are working with applications now where I can have a musician in South Africa play along with me with no delay. And the sound quality is excellent, and I even can have a visual if I want, So the recording industry has changed considerably. Now, on top of that, let's talk about AI. My experience with AI now is that I've experienced productions that are 100% AI. 100%. I mean, drummers, bass players, singers, songwriters, everything 100% AI.
What productions?
What productions?
Yeah.
Okay. I will do something here that I wasn't. This is a friend of mine. I'm a veteran.
Okay.
And I'm working with the VA. And I said, if you were to put together a song for a veteran, an unknown veteran in Minnesota, but he's a hero that's never been heard of before. A silent hero, so to speak. So here is a song. I'll just...
With a heart so grand, a specialist for class, a leader in command.
And you didn't go hire a band to write that, to perform that?
That's 100% AI.
Yeah.
The lyrics were written by Neil Bond, and Neil Bond orchestrated it.
So
that's
it was played
what,
by AI?
Pardon?
It was written or played by?
No, the lyrics are Neil Bond, orchestrated by Neil Bond, but there's no other human beings involved.
So the music itself was written by a person, but then it was performed by AI in a way?
There you go.
Okay.
How is that different than it? Like, I'm just confused because if it was written, is that like written in a score?
All I can say is you have to go there. Learn as much about it as you can.
Sure.
And I'll give you the app.
Okay.
And and that's all it takes.
What is it, stuff like that, like those AI as a technological change coming online?
It's happening right now. It's happening. The last 2 years has been incredible. Hollywood is all freaked out about it because, everybody lost their jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the recording studios. I mean, you don't even need a microphone anymore.
Yeah, and so in this example, it's replacing at least session musicians in some cases, but in other cases might be even replacing the lead primary musician. So,
I mean, I don't think that's an adequate replacement for a session musician. I mean, if I was to use the example that we have.
I mean, not necessarily, but situationally.
Okay,
maybe.
let me give you an idea on production. Normally, it would have taken to produce 35 production materials, song and visuals. And I'm talking production materials now, full song and visuals to go along with it. How long would that have taken a studio to produce 35 of them? Probably 4 or 5 years to get 35 productions down fully, totally.
Sure. I mean, I guess my immediate question would be, to what end?
You know how long it takes to do it now? 6 weeks. That's the difference. There's no time is no longer involved. All of a sudden, if you're thinking of doing something, it's done.
That is, in my opinion, not doing something. Very simply, like it just is not being done.
Well, everybody has an opinion.
I mean, because if you give me that and then tell me that you're going down from 30 weeks to 6 weeks or something, then it stops being a piece of art and starts being a product.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. I can't argue with that at all. It is a product.
My whole thing is, I think when it comes to art, people yearn a connection to the creator. And so I guess that's my biggest take on why I don't think that it's like replacement. I think the main thing it's going to replace is like people getting sync licenses and people getting their stuff in movies and commercials and stuff like that. But in its current form, I haven't been able to consume anything I was excited about. But also as a musician, I'm very connected to like connecting to the musician making the music. I think a great example would be like a pop star, like someone like Billie Eilish. I would say that their music is amazing, but their fame is just as much due to the like connection of the audience to them, which you could deep fake a person. But yeah, there's like the performance and connection element that I think would be lacking from the AI product, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All I can say is that I felt exactly the same way that you did the first, Jacob. When I experienced it, I was totally freaked out. I didn't like it. I hated it. And as a music person, but then I said to myself, now, wait a minute here. When you don't like somebody that much, and I asked it, I flat out asked it. I said, okay. I said, I want to be friends. How much am I going to have to learn and keep up with you? And it flat out responded by saying, Bobby, I'm going to need 10 times the power by the end of 2025. That was 8 months ago. So it's going to grow 10 times by the end of 2025, and we're already pushing the door for that. So I would say try to learn as much about it as you can, because it's the wave of the future.
It's just started making an impact, and you've given a couple of examples like that. I know we're just starting to see the effect of it, whether it's in Hollywood or whether it's in
right.
And we're seeing it here now too, where a band will come out with an album artwork, and we're like, I'm pretty sure that's AI generated.
I mean, it just makes my opinion of them much lower in general. Like when I know an artist is using AI materials to make creative work, I think less of them immediately and personally.
We've had some conversations about this on our team, but it's because it certainly is interesting. It'll be a topic of debate over the next couple of years. I would sure
immediately bring up the question of what AI product has made my life better right now.
Well, I think that's kind of like, because that's going to involve scoping what AI means and things like that. I will say, though, I believe we are getting off topic. We have been recording for an hour and 10 minutes, and I have to leave in 7 minutes.
Okay.
Well, let me leave then.
Why don't we? Yeah, we got to touch back on you as a musical historian, your time in Mankato here. You've got a couple of an upcoming event and some other things to share with us.
Right. And Neil Bond out there, being a music historian as he is, he's running the urban circle, so to speak. He knows all of the clubs and the people in the Minneapolis, St. Paul areas. And I've been working the rural areas, so to speak, and hitting out the historical moments. And it's coming up that what Neil Bond is doing, and we're talking about the Minnesota Music History Channel here. What Neil Bond is doing is he's documenting all of the players from Bobby V, from all of the musical players that we've produced in Minnesota. And I would pay close attention to what he is going to be producing here. And I'm part of that with the Songwriters series. And I've covered about 25, 30 songwriters right now that I'm producing with him. And I would say that within the next year or so, we will have pretty much a good coverage of the people all the way from Prince to the early people in the business here, in the music business here in Minnesota covered.
Okay. Cool.
So that's our whole idea, is document all of the music that Minnesota has produced, and there's a lot of it. Don't forget about the Minnesota Music Hall of Fame. I mean, that New Ulm group over there, they did a fantastic job of putting that Minnesota Music Hall of Fame together. I mean, it's first class. Not only that, it's documented, totally documented.
So check out the Minnesota Music Hall of Fame in New Ulm. And how will people be able to experience this other work that you were mentioning, the research that Neil and yourself are doing?
If they get online to YouTube to Neil Bond or the Minnesota Music History Channel.
Okay.
And that's on YouTube. And you'll see a series. He's got a lot of them out there right now. And a lot of them.
Okay.
And there's good documentation. Very good documentation. Well, hey.
And we got one or two other things. I don't think we're quite done yet. I know you held the book up, but...
I held it up and didn't talk
just a
about
moment
it.
About that. Yes.
Okay, this is the true story of how John Denver really got to be John Denver. I mean, Henry John Dutchendorf Jr., when he hit St. Peter, Carl Franzine, who wrote On the Road for him, wrote this book, and he's put it together and it documented. He went around the country, and he documented all the people that helped John become John. And he put it together in a excellent piece of literature and a documentation. So, and the way you get it now is you have to go to on Amazon, and it's FAAR, FAAAR, 3 A's, Far Out on Amazon. And I mean, believe me, it's a beauty.
And it's a relatively recent release as well,
yes,
right?
And it's only been on Amazon now for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Very recent release.
Very recent.
Cool. So people will just be getting into this. And what might, do you have any, to give it a little plug, do you have any idea of what might be new for people who would read this, who maybe have looked into John Denver a bit in the past, but what are they going to get out of this version?
Everything that happened to John Denver before he became John Denver.
So it's
how
really
did John Denver become John Denver?
Cool.
And it's very, very, very interesting. It's all by musicians.
Okay.
These are
all the stories in there.
Yeah, all the stories and all the facts are. I mean, you're going back into the New Christie Minstrels era. I mean, you're back into the 60s now, you know.
Well, and then with the idea that people should do some looking into John Denver history, you've got another John Denver related event.
Oh, the event coming up in St. Peter. Hello. June 13th. June 13th, 2025, St. Peter, Minnesota. We're going to have our first Young John Denver Festival. And for all of you who are interested in John Denver music and memorabilia and factual information about what really happened back in the St. Peter days, yes, please join us. It's just going to be a short, early afternoon of fun, evening of fun at St. Peter outside.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the program.
Hey, I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Awesome. Yeah, it was really cool getting to learn about all this, especially being involved in the music scene for like a decade. It was really cool to hear about.
Hey, guys, I was only planning on doing 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's not a problem. I genuinely have to get to work, but I was so awesome to be able to hear all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Bobby.
Hey, thank you, man, Willis.
Bye.
Yeah.